Dr. Stein's observer paradox. Zurich slept with the muted caution of a city where every shadow knows the regulations. In the underground hall of the Institute for Quantum Neurophysics, the air smelled of metal, cooled plastic, and insulation. Elizabeth Stein sat before a transparent console, lines of code streaming down like rain on glass, an ordered chaos from which something new was about to be born. Ordinary quantum entanglement of particles had long ceased to impress her. What fascinated her now were patterns, not of matter but of experience. In preliminary tests, a volunteer in Basel smiled, and an unfamiliar student in Lausanne suddenly felt a weight settle in his chest. Then came inversion, one person's anxiety coinciding with another's unnatural clarity, as if emotions were polarizing the space between them. The threshold experiment, symmetrical emotional inversion, paused at ethical risk, high. She ticked accept. Access to the U.S. prison network was granted after 38 minutes and 2 letters from lawyers representing a foundation that hid behind humanitarian rhetoric. They needed a control subject with pronounced affect aphology. There was no name, only a line. Inmate J. Elizabeth swiped her hand across the glass, and 2 session capsules appeared on the display. One here in Zurich, with a cushioned chair, noise cancellation, and biosensors. The other inside a nameless concrete block, where a camera peered down from the corner like it was embarrassed by its role. The video stream flashed for a second. A gaunt face, calm eyes, lips in the faintest trace of a smile. Still in the way only stones at a riverbed are still. "We start and we stop immediately if thresholds spike," Elizabeth said into the mic. Her voice was neutral. Her hand trembled only once, when the emotional contact indicator blinked green, taut as a wire inside her. While the system leveled out the noise, she thought of something banal. Why people touch electricity with bare fingers? The answer needed no formula, because anyone who touches hopes to stay alive, even if it means becoming someone else. The indicator flared, link established, parameters stable. For the first time, she let a foreign feeling enter that deep. The first impulse wasn't pain, more like a switch clicking somewhere deep inside. Elizabeth exhaled and realized her breath had changed, as if someone nearby was quietly laughing but producing no sound. On the adjacent screen, Jason's heart rate was steady, like he was dozing in the chair. Hers had risen just enough to be noticeable. "Confirming affect inversion," murmured Nora, her assistant, from the control room. "He's in a positive tone. You're in a negative one." Elizabeth nodded. On the monitor, a map of the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, insula. The signals formed a pattern like a city map with all the street names erased. He was enjoying himself, no commentary required. She felt a dull ache, like after a bruise, only the bruise was everywhere. The line between emotion and physical reaction was gone, and her brain was making the calls. Nora pulled up his file. Jason Crow, 41, serial episodes of violence, diagnosed with learned enjoyment of others' pain. The prison psychologist's note read like a zoological field entry. Elizabeth found it easier to breathe in that dryness. "Smile," Nora said. Elizabeth tried. The program registered the muscle movement, but her tone stayed negative. Instantly, Jason's pleasure curve spiked. He could feel her attempt and responded. In the second session, he did it on purpose. His pleasure readings shot into the red zone. Her pain scale? Like tiny needles under the skin, the clinician's note read. She caught herself laughing, quiet, ragged, senseless. The laugh inverted, too. It was as if she was laughing his laugh, but inside it burned. That night, she didn't sleep. The windows in her apartment looked like dead screens. She sat on the floor, back against the couch, replaying sensations in her mind. This wasn't metaphor. He was really using her inner switches, like a pianist with someone else's fingers. She didn't know where to step next, but she knew. To retreat was to invite him further in. In the third session, she tried to take control. Together, she and Nora programmed microbursts of dopaminergic reward from her side, artificial, brief, to test a rupture hypothesis. If her joy hit a ceiling, his pleasure would lose traction. Engineers love simple schematics. The brain doesn't. When the impulse hit, her chest tilted slightly forward, like someone remembering a name from childhood. On Jason's graph, a smooth curve swelled. He hadn't just responded, he'd matched her contour. Her positive spike became lubrication for his wheel, and the wheel spun. Elizabeth saw the loop clearly for the first time. Her pain, his pleasure, her intensified pain, his intensified pleasure. A feedback loop where each step was the derivative of the last. Mathematics grinned toothlessly. Ethics stayed silent. "Dial it down," Nora said. "No, we need to see the limit." By session's end, Elizabeth's lips trembled as if she'd just stepped out of icy water. Her skin felt too tight, her joints not her own. In the report, she avoided metaphor. System overload sensation with preserved cognitive focus. Nora added, "Subject J demonstrates operant learning in real time, seeks her pain as reinforcement of his own reward." That night brought dreams, neat, bloodless, but unbearable. Elizabeth stood in a kitchen, slicing bread, and each cut resonated in her palms, as if the knife passed through living tissue. She woke with the sense someone was in the apartment, listening to the air conditioner mimic steady breathing. The next morning, the prison psychologist called, polite, professional. "Dr. Stein, Jay asked me to tell you, she's a fine violin." She closed her eyes, kept her tone even. "Tell the violinist the instrument is learning to play itself." Pause, then, "He's glad you respond. Even refusal is a response." Elizabeth thought of paradoxes. Sometimes silence is louder than applause. But silence, too, is an emotion, if someone hears it. The theory didn't come from a database, but from Anton Grieve, a consciousness philosopher who wandered the Institute's halls in a wool coat, as if afraid thought might catch a chill. He listened without interrupting, nodding rarely. "Invertible emotions come in pairs," he said finally. "Joy and sorrow, fear and curiosity, shame and defiance. But there are states with no meaningful opposite. Not because there's nothing to oppose, but because they're not percentages, they're zero." "Meditation?" she asked. "Not peace. Peace is colored. 0 point is when perception registers a stimulus, but the system assigns no value. The world isn't good or bad, it simply is. And so are you." Elizabeth wrote, "Affective neutrality as a non-invertible quantity." In practice, it meant entering a state where any stimulus, sound, light, memory, received no label. Not paper-thin emptiness, but transparency. They began training. Sensory deprivation, floating in a saltwater tank until the body forgot its weight. Breathing protocols, transcranial stimulation to suppress fast pathways. Alongside, the taming of thoughts. Each evaluation that arose, she would quietly lift away, like dust from glass. Sometimes it worked for minutes, sometimes for a breath. Jason always reacted. Whenever she neared transparency, he provoked spikes. Remember betrayal. Think of your parents. Imagine falling down an elevator shaft. He never spoke, there was no two-way channel, but his emotional patterns hit their targets. "He's reading your map," Nora said, pressing the junctions. Elizabeth jotted in the margins. The battle isn't over feeling, it's over the mechanism that grants meaning. In one session, a false memory hit. She's walking at night along a riverside, soaked sneakers slapping the pavement, suddenly wanting to hurt someone, anyone. Inside, cold, glassy emptiness. She snapped her eyes open. On Jason's graph, a spike. He was celebrating. "I will not feel what you feed me," she told the empty room, and for the first time believed it as a plan. They prepared the room differently, stripped away all indicators but one, the green contact light. On her hand, an oximeter. At her neck, the chill of a heart monitor patch. Nora confirmed the emergency protocol. If QRS breaks, cut the link, defib ready, paramedics at the door. Elizabeth nodded silently. Accepted. She sat back and let the chair become a wall, closed her eyes. Imagined a quiet hall inside, windows open but curtains still. Air passing through her like through gauze, holding nothing. Perception without interpretation. Fingers on the armrests unclenched, not as a gesture of peace, but as refusal to grasp. The green light came on. Somewhere far away, a concrete room, bolts on the floor, straps on the chair, skin on Jason's wrists marked by years of habits. He smiled. She couldn't see, but she knew. The first wave hit, a familiar prick of his pleasure. The system auto-tagged it as pain, but this time she gently removed the label, set it aside. Fact, stimulus, evaluation unassigned. The second wave, stronger. He was ramping up. A reflex rose. Her body wanted to flinch, guard her throat, cheek muscle twitching. She noticed it the way a meteorologist notes a drop in pressure, falling, and did nothing. His pleasure curve wavered. "He's irritated," Nora whispered, then muted herself, knowing any word was a label. The third wave wasn't a wave, it was an axe. Music without notes. The world shrank to "I'm about to break." Inside, she saw a small room, not the one she sat in, but the one where she once cried as a child, waiting for her mother's steps. The memory wanted to become a value. She quietly turned off the light and left it dark. By the 5th minute, Jason tried pure sadism, hitting without imagery. But the blow scattered like ash, finding no surface. For the first time, his curves sank, not in collapse, but in fatigue. He was striking a drum that no longer sounded. Somewhere in that stretch, Elizabeth caught silence. Not a metaphor, an event. It wasn't good, it didn't save. It simply required no answer. In that silence, the link felt glass-like, visible but uncrushable. The green light blinked. Nora gasped. Jason's heartbeat skipped. Once, twice, then nothing. Elizabeth opened her eyes. She wasn't smiling or crying. She was. The protocols were written without flourish. Subject J, fatal outcome, likely due to emotional exhaustion with no somatic injury. Subject E, stable, vitals normal. The team that rushed into Jason's room worked cleanly, but their eyes were flat. They knew when it was too late. Elizabeth sat still as sensors were removed. She didn't feel relief, not because it was gone, but because she wasn't seeking it. The world around her was like a freshly prepped operating theater. Everything in place, sterile, nothing calling to her. Nora crouched to meet her gaze. "Are you back?" "I'm here." Here as in here, or here as in the observer? As glass, for now. In the director's office, they debated publications, grants, ethical novelty, whose names to print first. They spoke of neat graphs, safeguards, psychiatric potential. No one said aloud, "We found the button that turns off a monster." No one asked, "What happens to the one holding that button down?" That evening, she tried an old ritual, brewing coffee. The smell didn't say home. The bitterness didn't say comfort. Her hands completed the motions. Her tongue, stomach, blood remained observers. On the table lay Anton's card. 0 point is not a dwelling. It's a bridge. She put the card back. A bridge implies direction. She didn't know where. In the bathroom mirror, the reflection was honest. Eyes without the eyeliner of emotion. Not empty, transparent. 2 days later, she returned to the lab for a control test with a volunteer. young, fear-reactive. The link lit up, his palms sweated, heart rate spiked. Elizabeth marked the metrics. On her own scales, a flat line. Not defense, not armor, glass. "You don't feel anything?" Nora asked. "I see." "And?" "For now, that's enough to keep anyone from dying." Nora said nothing. Sometimes silence is not a label. Sometimes it's respect for the price someone paid for it. 8 months passed. Elizabeth no longer lived in the lab. She lived next to it. She rode her bike to work as before, only now the wind wasn't fresh or cold, just wind. She sat in cafes where the playlist hadn't changed in years, cups chiming the same on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Occasionally, people approached, a journalist, a med student, a pain clinic doctor. They wanted the story in a comfortable arc, about salvation, vengeance, cost. She spoke of method, metrics, safety protocols. No one asked about Jason. His name was now a footnote in a paper, neat and dry. She didn't mind. Footnotes build bridges too. Anton once asked, "Did you stay in the 0 point?" "No." "Then where?" "On a cliff with no signs, but there's no wind there." He smiled his warm woolen smile. "So your taste for metaphor is returning?" "It's just language, Anton. Language isn't feeling." That evening, walking home, she stopped at a music store window. Inside, a teenager plucked guitar strings, producing uneven chords. The sound was raw, frayed. Elizabeth stood for a long time, not because she liked it, but because it was. At one moment, his fingers found a clean note, and she felt something stir faintly in her chest, like the thinnest web shifting in the breeze. Not joy, not sadness, just proof that glass can tremble. At home, she hung up her coat, set the kettle to boil, and placed her palm on the table. The warmth of the wood slowly rose to her skin. She didn't name it, didn't have time. The kettle clicked. Outside, the city was no louder or quieter than yesterday. Elizabeth took her cup and sat by the window. She knew, if she ever had to go back into that room and be Blass again, she could. But today, she could just watch the light change its angle, assigning nothing. It wasn't salvation or sentence. It was a way to stay alive when they'd asked her to be an instrument.